All right, today we're exploring one of the most powerful and frankly epic stories ever told. It's a journey of liberation, incredible hardship, and just unwavering faith. This is the story of the Exodus. So, our story kicks off right here, in the mighty empire of ancient Egypt. Now, for hundreds of years, the Israelite people have been enslaved. You have to imagine, their lives are defined by nothing but brutal labor under the absolute rule of the Pharaoh. Their suffering was just immense, and any hope for freedom was all but gone. And that really brings us to the central question of this entire saga, doesn't it? How could this possibly happen? How does a nation in bondage just rise up and walk free? Well, the answer begins not with an army or a big uprising, but with one very unlikely leader. So let's meet the man at the center of it all, Moses. Moses' life is just a story of contradictions. I mean, he was born a Hebrew, a slave by birthright, but through this incredible twist of fate, he ends up being raised in the Pharaoh's own palace. So he's learning the ways of the Egyptians, but he can never escape the sight of his own people's suffering. He was a man literally caught between two completely different worlds. And then everything changes. God calls to Moses from a burning bush. You know, a fire that burns but somehow doesn't consume the bush. The command is clear, it's direct, and it's got to be terrifying. Go back to Egypt and lead the Israelites out of slavery. What's so human about this moment, though, is that Moses hesitates. He doubts himself. He questions why on earth he would be the one chosen. And that reluctance is key. It shows that leadership isn't about arrogance, but about accepting a responsibility that feels way bigger than yourself. But you know, freeing an entire nation wasn't going to be a matter of simple negotiation. Oh no. It was going to require a dramatic and terrifying confrontation, a divine ultimatum delivered directly to Pharaoh. So when Pharaoh refuses to free the Israelites, a series of 10 plagues is unleashed on Egypt, and each one gets more severe than the last, just escalating the pressure. The lifeblood of Egypt, the Nile River, it turns to blood. A plague of locusts swarms the land, eating every single green thing in sight. And the crisis builds to the most devastating plague of all, the death of every firstborn son in Egypt. And right here, we see the two opposing forces in this conflict just laid bare. On one side, you've got Pharaoh's defiance. I mean, despite the utter devastation of his country, his pride and his stubborn grip on power make him refuse to let the people go. But on the other side, you have the Israelites' faith. They're instructed to mark their doors with the blood of a lamb, an act we now know as the Passover, which protects them from that final terrible plague. It's this act of faith that finally breaks Pharaoh's will. Broken, Pharaoh finally lets them leave. But as the Israelites march toward freedom, the story is far from over. In fact, the most dramatic moment of their escape is still to come. So the Israelites have just gotten a taste of freedom, but Pharaoh, already regretting his decision, sends his entire army after them. Can you just imagine the scene? The people are trapped. Behind them, the most powerful army in the world is bearing down. And in front of them, the vast, impassable Red Sea. There is literally no escape. And then, the impossible happens. At Moses' command, a great wind blows, and God parts the waters of the Red Sea. A path of dry land just appears where a moment ago there was only water. The Israelites walk right through, with these giant walls of water standing on either side of them. It's unbelievable. They make it to the other side. But just as Pharaoh's army charges into that same path, the waters crash down upon them, destroying them completely. In that single, defining moment of divine power, their freedom is finally, truly won. But escaping Egypt, that was only the beginning. Now came a brand new challenge. A long journey through a vast and unforgiving wilderness, where this group of freed slaves would have to be forged into a nation. And this journey was not a short one. It took 40 years of wandering in the desert. And you have to understand, this wasn't just a physical journey. It was a period of immense testing and spiritual trial for an entire generation. Life in the wilderness was incredibly tough. They faced starvation, thirst, rebellion, fear, you name it. They had to learn what it even meant to be free and to depend completely on God for survival, who provided them with things like manna from heaven and water from a rock. These 40 years in the crucible of the desert literally shaped their entire identity. It's also during this journey that a really foundational concept gets introduced, the covenant. Now, think of it as a sacred and binding agreement, kind of like a two-way promise that is absolutely central to everything that happens next. So at Mount Sinai, God gives Moses the 10 Commandments. These moral and ethical laws become the foundation of that covenant. It's pretty straightforward. The people agree to live by these laws, and in return, God promises to be their protector, their guide, and to lead them to a new home, the Promised Land. So after decades of wandering, the laws have been given, and the covenant has been made. Now the final leg of the journey begins. The goal is finally within reach. As they get close to the land of Canaan, Moses sends 12 spies, one from each tribe of Israel, to go and scout out the land God had promised them, a land said to be flowing with milk and honey. But the spies, well, they don't exactly return with a unified message. In fact, their reports reveal this deep conflict. 10 of them come back absolutely terrified. They say the land is filled with giants, the cities are fortified, and that conquering it is just impossible. Their report spreads fear and panic like wildfire. But 2 of the spies, Joshua and Caleb, they offer a totally different perspective. They remain faithful, insisting that with God's help, they can succeed. It's another crucial test of faith versus doubt. Because of their fear, that first generation, they weren't allowed to enter the land. They had to wait. But after the full 40 years had passed, a whole new generation, one that had been born in freedom and raised on faith in the wilderness, stood at the border, ready to claim the promise. And they do. The 12 tribes of Israel finally cross into their new home. They find it to be a land of incredible abundance, just as God had promised. The journey is over. The promise is fulfilled. And so we end with this thought. The story of the Exodus is so much more than just an ancient tale. It's a profound exploration of freedom and identity. And it really forces us to ask, what does a journey of such immense hardship, one that spans generations, ultimately reveal about the incredible power of faith and the simple, stubborn endurance of hope?